So, as I noted in the introduction, uh, we're going to be talking in this lesson about trying to kind of pull the pieces together that we've been talking about so far: environment and strategy and resources and capabilities, and see what we can do to find sources of competitive advantage for firms. Now, we've touched on this in a variety of places before, but here we're going to try to bring these various things together. It's important, though, in terms of context, to think about the differing views and assumptions about the nature of competitive advantage. And we noted back as we were going through the lessons on environmental analysis and on capabilities that there had been a shift in some of these assumptions over time. So you see here that in the traditional kind of the industrial organization economics view, competitive advantage was thought to come from industry structure, and the notion was that firms should find attractive industries, position themselves to take advantage of the industry conditions, and work where they could uh, to maintain those conditions. Currently, though, perhaps more popular would be a better way to say it, the resource based or dynamic capabilities view. Again, we were introduced to this in the capabilities lesson. Says that really the opportunities for advantage come not from the stable industry structure, but from market disequilibrium, from changes that happen. And then it's the capabilities that provide the basis for taking advantage of these opportunities. And you could look at it kind of diagrammatically this way. This is one that's offered in the chapter. It says that competitive advantage emerges from changes, either external sources, things like changes in customer demand, technology, economic conditions, etc., in which case the advantage comes from how quickly firms can recognize and respond to those changes. It's also driven by actions of firms. Sometimes firms innovate, either in products or in processes, and those create the disequilibrium for an industry and create a source of competitive advantage. And I think all of that kind of makes sense, suggests that any advantage is going to last only for a period until others eventually copy it. The chapter will go into detail about uh, what can lead to maintaining some of these advantages. Um, but overall, I think, like I say, the general approach makes sense. However, then we've got to talk about taking advantage of the opportunities, whether the firm drives them or whether they're responses to changes in the marketplace. And here, the chapter goes one way, I'm going to go a slightly different way. The chapter takes a pretty traditional view. And it's odd to me that on the one hand, and this is not just the book, this is kind of where the field has gone. Uh, on the one hand, we recognize the changes in markets, the disequilibriums, the advantages of building from capabilities rather than just market conditions. But then we kind of fall back on what I call traditional views of positioning the firm for advantage, low cost and differentiation. And it's not that these are wrong, but they don't quite jive with this dynamic view of industry disequilibrium and change. Really at the risk of becoming a little esoteric on you here, but trying to provide a little context. We go back to supply and demand, and if you want to know where low cost and differentiation as advantages come from, they really stem just from this. If this is the traditional notion of a market at equilibrium. Supply for the industry, demand for the industry leads to price and quantity equilibrium positions. Well, low cost and differentiation kind of work like this. Not exactly, but kind of conceptually. If I'm pursuing a low cost leader, what I'm really trying to do is get my supply curve below the industry typical supply curve. Uh, in which case I would really be willing to supply the same quantity at a lower price than other firms in the industry. But if I can command the kind of industry average price while my costs are lower, then I can make an above average return. I can make more money than others in the industry can. Uh, I say this presumes that my product meets at least basic industry standards, uh, but then I can get a higher price while my costs are actually lower. The differentiator, on the other hand, works on the other side. It wants to have essentially a demand curve, uh, if you will, that is above that of the industry because it is offering something different, better quality service, etc., things we've talked about before. Uh, it, in theory, should be able to command a higher price for its products and services than the typical firm in the industry would. And assuming, and big assumption there, but assuming that it can do this while maintaining a supply, an individual supply curve that's close to the industry average, then it can make its money that way because its costs are near the industry, but the price it is charging is above the industry average price. Okay, I'm not saying these are wrong. I'm just saying that they don't quite fit with the more dynamic notion because they come out of the traditional views. So, after you're done with the chapter, after you've been through the quiz, I'm going to introduce an alternative. And just to kind of set the stage for it here, this alternative view says, what if we think about perspective rather than just market positioning? That is, how's the firm going to generally behave in the face of ongoing market changes? If we accept the notion that in today's world, markets are not really stable for long periods of time, and industry structure does not drive the choice, but instead responding to change does, then what's going to be our perspective in responding to these changes? Are we going to try to be the firm that's leading the change? Are we going to be one that quickly follows changes and responses that other firms make? Or perhaps we could try to find a piece of the market where change is less likely to occur. Again, we'll come back to all of this, but keep it in mind as you're going through the chapter, looking at the traditional sources of competitive advantage and the things that drive them.